God bless you, church. My name is Ruben Reyna. This is my wife, Lilith, and this is my testimony. When I was 20 years old, I got offered a job to go work out of the state in the oil industry, and I was promised the work was hard and the money was good, but the play would be even harder, and I didn't think twice and I took the job. I left my family behind. I wasn't married at the time. I started working. 5 years later, was working in San Antonio, and on October 2nd of 2010, on my way to work, as I was crossing a curve, another driver fell asleep at the wheel, and he crossed the center median, and we collided head on at 80 miles an hour. Now, I was not wearing a seatbelt at the time. The impact was so strong that the other driver and his passenger instantly died. The paramedics that got there did not want to take me to the hospital in an ambulance. They said I would not make it. So I was airlifted from the scene of the accident to a hospital in San Antonio, where they worked on my body for over 12 hours to try to put me back together. I suffered multiple fractures from my nose down to my toes on my left side. I broke every bone on my left side almost. I bled out so much that they had to put over 120 pints of blood back in me to keep me alive. I fell into a 3-day coma. I died twice. They brought me back twice. About a week later, when I was able to speak, the doctors were telling me that I was so lucky to be alive. That I was so lucky that I didn't have any brain damage or swelling in my brain or anything like that. Now, my body was broken, but they were telling me that I was lucky that nothing happened to me in my head, and that I still had a good head on my shoulders. Amen. But a few days later after that, when I was able to speak, my father told me something that happened the night of my accident. So if you recall, I crashed at 6 in the morning, and my dad at 3 in the morning was asleep, and he said he heard a voice to get up and to say a prayer for me, a prayer of protection, that nothing would happen to me that day. And my dad, not knowing what was going on, he got up, said a prayer, and went back to sleep. And 6 hours later, they call him and tell him to get to San Antonio, that I was not in a good state. And that's all they told him, and so they rushed over there. But when my father told me that when I was in ICU, and he told me that God had spoken to him to say a prayer over my life. See, prior to that day, I was talking to God and asking, why did I have to go through that? And when my father told me that God told him to pray for me, that nothing would happen, I knew that what I had gone through was in God's plan. It might sound like a bad thing for God to do to a person, to put him through an accident and that much pain, and I was hospitalized for 3 months. I was bedridden for 6 months. I was in a wheelchair for an additional 6 months. I used crutches for 18 months. I didn't walk for 2 years. But you do not know the life that I lived prior to my accident. See, I was, like Pastor Kevin said, I was disconnected with God. There was a stone between me and the Father. And that accident removed the stone. That accident made me draw closer to God. At a time where I thought I had nobody, God was always there with me. He never left me. Now fast forward 4 years later after my accident, I'm still in the process of recovery and starting to walk. And God sends me this angel. I meet my wife, my girlfriend at the time. She starts bringing me to church. Amen. And God just transformed my life I thought I was living, and I thought I had a good life prior to my accident. And I thought my accident was a bad thing, but now looking back, I know that that's the only way God could have drawn me back to him. Because countless times he stood at the door knocking. Countless times. And I'd look through the door and see him, and I'd run and hide like Adam. Amen. So I know that looking back now, God has blessed me with a beautiful wife, a wonderful marriage, 2 beautiful daughters. I'm believing God for a baby boy. Amen. Soon to come. Amen. You can't limit God. Amen. But guys, if I can just leave you with anything from my testimony, is don't give up. Don't stop praying. Even though it doesn't happen instantly, guys, the minute that you pray and believe, that minute God has already heard and answered your prayer. It just takes time for things to come to pass here in the natural world from the spirit world. But God is still a God of miracles today. And I'm just so thankful for the miracle that He did in our life. God bless you guys.